What's up, Pip Killers? Welcome to the very first FXPRIME report. Episode 1 is here. That's right, we're going to discuss some currencies. We're going to take a look at how to get some more of those currencies. We're going to look at some geopolitical topics, perhaps a few reviews of stories online, and also news about currencies, so on and so forth. Now, before I get into today's episode, I want to let you know that today's video is brought to you by FXPRIME, which is an AI algorithm that I've been working on the last 10 years. We have a great track record when it comes to producing significant, consistent gains in the Forex markets. With that being said, learn what it means to beat Wall Street with the most advanced AI FX signals by watching the free webinar in the link at the description below. Be sure to like and comment on this video and subscribe to the channel. And also, don't forget to hit the bell so you will get notifications anytime I go live or upload a new video. I greatly appreciate your continued support. Now, let me just start off by saying I fucking love capitalism. I love the concept of someone creating, enhancing, or disrupting value by the way of entering a market, making it more efficient, improving productivity, so on and so forth. But let me tell you what is not capitalism. I call it bitch capitalism or faux capitalism. This horrible idea that bankers or people in the financial industry somehow get to privatize their gains and socialize losses. That's not capitalism. It's basically taking advantage of unsuspecting consumers of the general economy just because they aren't properly versed in financial terminology. It's like putting brass knuckles inside of boxing gloves and going out there having a boxing match and then all of a sudden being proud of your guy because he actually beat the opponent by cheating. That's not a true definition of capitalism. That's cheating. That to me is bitch capitalism. Okay, so when we look at this article from Bloomberg, the richest 1% of Americans close to surpassing the wealth of the middle class. The reason why this particular article is so dangerous is that if you look through history, this type of wealth distribution is not good by any definition. The wealth distribution that is occurring here is not only bad, but with the exception of a few individuals in that top billionaire list, the Forbes 400 or the top billionaires, whatever you want, whatever list you want to go by. There's quite a few on Bloomberg, Forbes. The idea that this is something to be celebrated is not good unless it comes from true productivity. My example of true productivity would be someone like Elon Musk, okay? Goes into an industry, literally reinvents it, makes it more efficient, advances technology, brings something new to consumers. What is not that? Well, having a bailout ready for the larger businesses, ready for the larger banks because they're too big to fail, is not capitalism. It's actually a better definition of fascism. It's closely approaching true fascism, where the ownership of the companies is now being done by the elite. Okay? Does it have to be a country? Does it have to be a political entity? Well, what about a technocracy? Or what about an oligarchy? You get these situations where we have to rush in and now save these companies just because they're so large. Well, that's not capitalism. It's not. It just isn't. And guess what? Now, if you look at some of the other writings, billionaires are getting even richer from the pandemic. Enough is enough. And I'm not a big reader of CNN. I'm going to try and draw from quite a few resources here. Okay? But in that last Bloomberg article, 1%ers, or the top 1%, now hold as much wealth as the middle and upper class combined. Okay? We're talking about $83 trillion. And if you look at how billionaires are getting richer from the pandemic, well, of course they are. Of course they are. CNBC is reporting that about 7.5 million businesses are in danger of closing due to this pandemic. Wrongly shut down, unconstitutionally shut down, and taking out of the competitive environment for many industries. And then here we parade around saying, these billionaires are getting richer. Well, of course they are. If you remove their competition, of course they're going to get fucking richer. Do you expect them to get poorer? You removed their competition. You removed the small businesses and the mom and pop shops. Where else is the currency going to flow to? You think people are just not going to buy things? Well, of course not. And yet we look at a headline like this and we say, wow, those billionaires must be doing something correct. Far from it. What we have is the government intervening, creating an unnecessary and wrongful strategic approach that is not backed by science, shutting down small businesses, and creating an unfair advantage for the people who already have the advantage, for the businesses who already have the advantage. This is ridiculous. In this article, they talk about billionaires in general. And if we look and we scroll down and we see, some of the highlights of the article. First of all, since the COVID-20 numbers are not anywhere near accurate, you have to take all of the numbers that you read from this point forward in any article with a grain of salt. Who knows who the statisticians are keeping track of this or reporting it. But let's just say, that these numbers are correct. And the Forbes 400, basically within a decade, had their wealth increase by over 80%. Is that just because these people are so smart, or is it because there are loopholes that they're taking advantage of? And then something like this quote unquote fodemic comes along and tips the ante in their favor even more by removing competition. Now, from two sources, this source here, CNN, and then also CNBC, reports that Jeff Bezos alone has made an extra $25 to $28 million since January 1st of 2020. And guess what? Bullshit. It's only because the competition was removed. Is that something to celebrate? We should be shaming this. This is not... I don't even think Jeff Bezos himself feels good about this. And if he does, maybe we need to start rethinking where we should put our money. Because it's insane that we report this and a lot of people are going to look at it and think of it in a bright light as a high note. It's something to be celebrated, right? The rich are getting richer. It's really not something to be celebrated. Look throughout history. When this occurs and we have this lopsided accumulation of wealth, especially spurred on by the fodemics and other loopholes, and laws that tip the favor even more so to the side of the haves versus the have-nots. Well, guess what? Numbers also run the other way, meaning that the number of people, the have-nots, increases. And when you have that much power concentrated in the hands of a great number of people, in terms of their numbers, but not in terms of their wealth, you know what they do. They eventually revolt. There's eventually an uprising. Articles like this shed light on the duality of the concept and the mindset of capitalism. On one hand, if this was a truly capitalistic gain in wealth, it would be something to be celebrated. But we know it's not. We know that the majority of that wealth is flowing to shareholders. It is not flowing to the consumers by means of increasing utility. It's just not. The consumerism does not mean that there's utility. And utility does not mean that there's consumerism. And this is something that we need to take a step back and look at. If you look through some of these numbers, okay, $1,500, a $1,200 check given to people from the bailout. Where are the numbers that audit each of these large companies that got bailed out per employee? What did they receive in terms of that bailout? Where is the actual utility that accounts for them deserving that bailout? I bet it's not there. And as a matter of fact, if we look at a few other things, and here we have an article by the Washington Post entitled Tax Change by COVID-20 Package Overwhelmingly Benefits Millionaires, Congressional Body Finds. Well, let's not forget that quite a few people in Congress gave themselves raises as well, which amounted to multiples of what the $1,200 checks that individuals received turned out to be. I think it was $39,000 that some individuals are receiving. In whatever case, if it's over $1,200, why do we see these individuals getting paid these incredible increases in their income, yet people around the U.S. being forced to have zero income, being furloughed, small businesses getting no money, especially in comparison to the larger businesses, and all of this happening at a time where the 1% are able to profit from the bailouts that are going into the stock market. You know, it's almost as if this was on purpose. And if you look at the strategy of this occurring, because that's what I believe it is. I believe that this is a strategy. Because if it was not a strategy, why do we see all of these things occurring where tax benefits are going to the 1%? The 1% gaining from the stock market, the 1% gaining from the bailouts going to public companies, because who are the overwhelming shareholders in those public companies? It's generally the top 20% of wealth holders in the US and other countries. So they're profiting from the bailout, they're profiting from the tax loopholes. How much more could you do to actually tip the wealth gaining momentum in their favor? As a matter of fact, if you want a recipe for socialism, this would be the Iron Chef version of that recipe. This is And it's the package for the wealthy to gain more. If you had to put it together as a strategy, this is it. As a matter of fact, not only that, but if you take a gander at this chart here, diverging fortunes, this is the change in financial assets since the end of the recession in 2007, 2009. And we see the top 1% and the top 60 to 80%, so that's the top 40% of financial asset holders. And I'm assuming that this is all financial asset holders. The Federal Reserve put out this chart. And if we see that there was going to be, let's say, a 30 to 50% decline in the market, who are the only people who actually make it out of that decline? It's only the top 40% of asset holders. Everybody else would be underwater completely. So we have a double whammy here where if a decline in the market occurs, everybody gets wiped out except for the top 40%. And then we also see multiple strategies being employed to help those people even more at the top 40%. So if current policy is driving wealth to the top 1% faster than ever in history, history always shows us that that's going to lead to civil unrest. Period. These top 40% wealth holders, I would not have a problem with the wealth flowing to those individuals if it were from actual output and actual gains in utility. Who would? If it were from actual gains in utility, that would just mean that at some point, people that are not getting as much would be motivated even more so to get to the top. But when you start putting the advantage to the top 1% and giving them not incentive, but favor, and you keep and the idea and the goal is to keep the 1% holding that wealth instead of fostering people who don't yet have the wealth to come up with greater, better ideas and produce more output and utility. You end up with a system that is not capitalism. So you have to ask yourself 3 important questions. And the questions are as follows. Number 1, how are these individuals accomplishing this wealth accumulation? Well, it's partly because, yes, they have systems in place that largely produce vast amounts of income in some type of vehicle that they are a majority or an overwhelming shareholder in. So they're getting large amounts of income. I get that. They built something. But why do they get helped even more so on top of that with current policy? If someone is that smart, they don't need policy favors. Right? And the idea comes back to lobbying, and it comes back to all these different components, but it's mostly politically motivated. There is no economic incentive to keep money at the top with people who are already making money through policy. There is none. In fact, it may be short term. Maybe there's a short-term economic incentive through lobbying dollars or somehow kickbacks being given. But the long term is devastating. There is no long-term economic advantage to ensuring that the rich get richer. It's quite the opposite, in fact. It destroys the long term. We've seen this many times through history. Question 2, who will a 30 to 50% decline in assets hurt the most? Well, it doesn't hurt those top 40%. They're actually the only ones who will be staying above water. But however, everyone else gets decimated. Everybody else gets put into negative territory. Everybody else gets bankrupt. How does that help the economy as a whole? It doesn't. In fact, it ends up eating itself. Eventually, the assets that those people hold, well, who's going to be left to buy them? Right? So you end up owning all of the assets, and the wealth concentrates at the top, and the whole system eventually collapses. Very interesting that the short-term sight of most of the people involved will read these articles and they'll say, well, of course, we want to keep the money at the top with the people that are smarter, with the people who are providing the jobs, so on and so forth. And that's not true. They have to know through basic economic principles that the long term will eventually see them losing everything, if not them, their children, so on and so forth. I guess they believe that if they keep the power of the earnings within a company that they largely own through shares, that it can continue to perpetuity, that it can just continue forever throughout multiple generations. But that's just not going to happen. Eventually, what we've seen happens throughout history is there's always going to be a price to pay. But the third question, and possibly one of the most important questions, is why are small businesses around the United States and other countries being forced to stay closed when this will undoubtedly crush everyone except the top 40% of the highest asset holders, the highest financial asset holders? They know that it's going to crush. What will be more important to these people, power or money? And I guess they feel that at some point, the game is going to stop. But the incentive to keep it going and to sow seeds into the brighter ideas, into the small businesses, I guess they're not about that at this point. So on that note, and looking at this particular chart from the Federal Reserve, we're going to end it. I really appreciate you guys for tuning in, and I don't want to cause something that drags on in terms of, commentary. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but something has to be done about this. And at some point, if something is not done about it, it's going to correct itself. And that's usually not safe, and it's not comfortable. It's going to lead to a very uncomfortable time unless people correct it and they stop giving advantages to the top 40%. That's not the way it goes. Reward utility instead of having these instances where policy definitely gives the people who already have momentum an upper hand and a major advantage. Guys, again, thanks for tuning in. Please be sure to like and comment on this video. This is episode 1. I'm pretty sure in the future that I'm going to be having a lot more relaxation. We're going to be covering a lot of interesting topics in the future. And I hope that you guys will get those notifications on your phone. Click the bell. Don't forget to subscribe, but also get the notifications. As we know, YouTube and other social networks will not actually put that push notification through to your phone unless you instruct them to do so. I will see you guys in the next episode.